Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, and welcome everyone to the Destination Simple podcast, where we talk about our own daily experiences with simple living so that you can feel inspired to find your own path to less stress and more joy. When we have these conversations, we really hope to plant seeds to make intentional choices so that you can grow these ideas to best fit your own life.
That's right. And we base our podcast usually off of either one of my blog posts or off of my newsletter. We found a couple of newsletter essays that have been interesting we wanted to talk about. So I'm a intentional living blogger, and so today we're going to jump right in, and we're actually using one of the essays that I sent out in a recent newsletter. So these aren't available on my blog. If you want these personal essays, please visit my website and sign up for my newsletter. And the link for that, of course, is in the show notes. So I'm just going to jump right in. Can a high trigger a low? I've been riding high on all the excitement of launching our Destination Simple podcast and all the work that goes into putting a podcast together. It was fun, exciting, and receiving feedback from people has been such a gift. Thank you. So it was a bit unnerving to wake up recently and feel low, like super low. No energy, no creativity, a bit cryy, to be honest. The negative self-talk was winning. What was this? The day before, I was in an elated state, and this felt like a crash. What could be the cause? I started counting up my current stressors. There's been a few rejections in other areas of my life. Rejection is never fun. My main character on a show James and I are watching died, and it was very sad. Could I be mourning a fictional character? Maybe. That seems a little odd, but maybe they were stacking up. And then it dawned on me, nothing is permanent. A lesson I've learned that helps deal with and understand change. That state of excitement couldn't last. It's just not possible. And when I thought about how hard I've been working to get this podcast off the ground, as well as focus on my other current projects, I realized I burned out. Of course. So I was easy on myself for a few days, worked on what felt like what I had the energy to do. Remembered the mantra from my performance coach, Leslie: few, significant, thorough. I reduced my to-do list, few, to just one priority, significant, and focused just on that to the end, thorough. Although I admit I've not returned to the state of elation, I'm feeling much better and on a consistent trend. Taking the time to notice the changes, understand what's happening, and then putting into practice what I've learned will help me recover. Ebbs and flows in our mood are natural. Our emotions change constantly. Learning your patterns and habits and recognizing the messages from your body and mind and putting into place what is necessary to move forward is a practice worth spending some time.
I want to say to the listeners, imagine getting that email in your inbox on a morning when you might have an onslaught of emails, the to-do list might be things from work, you might be at work, all of the things you need to do, but then that email is in your inbox. And that's how I feel. And I've said this before, when I get a broadcast from Suzanne, either from her blog or from your newsletter, it's a pause for me to really consider some of the things that make me feel better. And your like a newsletter like that is permission, just gives me even just a glimpse of permission to notice what's going on in my own life and notice what I might need to do to shift the balance back towards, holding my own energy or bringing some energy back into the cup rather than the habitual sending it all out until I'm drained or burnt out. So thank you for that. And always a high recommendation to join your newsletter subscription because it's just beautiful like that.
Thank you.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to you too. I mean, I appreciate sometimes I feel when I write, especially the newsletter, tends to be a little bit more on a personal level than my blog. And so it's actually probably one of the more difficult things that I write. And it takes a lot more thought to kind of decide what I'm going to write about for the newsletter essay. And I'll admit there are times where I was like, why did I start sharing such personal stuff in this newsletter? Because it's really hard to write. It's where the work is.
Yeah. But it's so easy to relate,
Yeah. And the feedback that I'm getting from people on that is what reassures me that I'm on the right path there. And that I've often thought that, and I realized a long time ago that sometimes people just need permission, right? We get so caught up in, and we've talked about the shoulds many times, that we need permission to kind of take that pause, like you said, and give ourselves the okay to step out of the hamster wheel of expectations.
Yes.
And say, hold on a second, this is what I need right now. And so that's kind of where I come from with the essays and often with my blog posts as well, is just for people to understand that it's okay for them to not be okay, that it's okay to figure out what you need. That so often we're just so entrenched in what's happening that we don't take the time to think about, like how I referred to in my news. I had to think about it. Like, am I upset because a fictional character died on a TV show? It's almost like, do I really even want to admit that? But no, I don't think, I think that had a very small part to do with it, but I do think it triggered, crying and being upset and kind of that stress release in that moment where it was like, you know what? It kind of made it okay that my husband's sitting beside me and here I am blubbering over this character dying. But I think I probably really just needed to get all these emotions out and all the stuff that was happening in my head, that just gave me the release I needed to go ahead and feel that, right? And blame it on a TV show, right?
Yeah.
And
it's like you're a balloon that's very full and then there's a pinprick, right? And it was the TV show, but it allowed everything to kind of like the pressure to just be released.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, and I think that I think it's common, I know for women anyway, to have these moments where sometimes you just cry. It's like you just feel better afterwards. You just, we hold everything inside and we're all pent up, and all of a sudden you just need to just like release it all, and then you cry, and like 20 minutes later it's like, oh, I feel better, right? Because you just felt the feelings and let it out.
Allowed yourself to feel it more deeply than just kind of running it around in your head like the story, and kind of let it out. And I think the other important thing you say in the essay is, the more you have your practices or, the phrases or the things that help you, you were able to remember, some guidance from your mentor, few significant Thoreau, and really step back into your tools and your practices. So I think what you're writing about is like having a very human experience of, even though you work in intentional living, you write on intentional living, this happens to all of us, right? There's no perfect life that's free of stressors. And so sometimes for every single one of us, they build up and they may layer on each other, and it can be too much. And the point of practicing these things isn't to be free of stressors. It's just to have something to work with when things do get overwhelming, or to call yourself back before you get to extreme burnout, right? I think it sounds in the essay like you were tiptoeing towards burnout, but you weren't in the burnout. You were in, in the winter or last year.
No, and even though I say that, I had reached burnout there, it was kind of this, it was more just this moment of realizing that this is where I'm at. I've kind of hit this energy block where I used up whatever I had and I crashed, right? But it's the catching it and taking a step back. That's the lessons, right? Like
totally
learning to live simply and live intentionally actually takes some work, right? You're breaking a lot of habits, you're changing a lifestyle,
it's work.
Simple,
it really
simple,
is.
but not easy, right? Like it's not easy, but it gets easier if you just take bite-sized pieces. I'm going to work on changing this. I'm going to work on changing. I mean, I started learning about minimalism 5 years ago. I've been on a 5-year journey of simplifying my house. And then burnout taught me that I need to actually start applying this across my life. So that's been, only a year and a half, right? And so
oh my gosh, I just need to pause on that for a second. That's really valuable. Because working minimalism with the things is one important part of it. Working the minimalism philosophy across your life is simple living. It is intentionality. I just love that. Yeah, the principles apply, and we can apply them to how we show up in the world.
Right. But it takes time.
It takes time. No, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. And but it takes time to put it all together. So, I'm sharing my journey with people and kind of putting out there as I figure it out, how it's happening. And I certainly feel like I've come far enough along this journey that I'm completely willing to share with people and work with people and, help them in their situations. But I'm also on that journey myself, which, I'm constantly applying the tools that I've learned, because I can still go back and forth. I'm still figuring it out. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, few significant thorough. I mean, I have it. You can't see it on there because it's blurred out, but it's written and it's stuck to my computer monitor, right? Because that was a key thing that Leslie taught me. Because I very much start taking on more and more and more. And then this doesn't get finished, and this doesn't get finished, and that doesn't get finished because I've put too much on my plate, right? So how do I say, okay, today I'm focused on this. And then tomorrow, if what I did yesterday isn't finished, then before I take on my new project, I have to consider where I was in yesterday's project. And do I need to finish that first? Where am I at? Or if the priority changes, then when am I picking it up again? And I'm putting stuff on my calendar and into my schedule so that I don't lose track and forget. But I mean, really, I keep it to 1 or 2 things a day that I focus on, and then that's it, right?
So that's few. So actually, let's spend a minute on this, because this is one of my favorite things I've heard from you, even I think in a newsletter or a blog. And it really feels like the essence of all of our conversations. So what Suzanne has been saying is a mantra of few, significant, thorough. So few, you can describe in your own words. Few being few things, few projects. What is it to you?
Yeah. It depends. I have to remind myself, actually, in a lot of places. Like this is another thing that I apply everywhere. It has to occur to me, and it's always, I try to connect it to as soon as I start feeling overwhelmed. Wait a minute. Few, significant, thorough, because usually overwhelmed, I'm taking on too much. And that can be, we're having company for supper and I've planned too many dishes, which happened actually last Christmas when I was still in pretty heavy kind of burnout recovery, and the thought, we were having people over at our place for Christmas, and the thought of making Christmas dinner was like, I couldn't even think about it. I was exhausted at the thought. And that's my cue to know that I'm not ready to do that. So what am I going to do? And James and I talked about it. And how do we simplify Christmas dinner? Right. And we're having company, and we're going to have, I mean, it was a smaller, I think we had 8 people, but what am I going to do? And it was, okay, you know what? We're going to throw Christmas dinner in the slow cooker, and we made chicken stew with whatever you would have for Christmas dinner. Everything went into slow cooker, right?
Yeah.
The veggies, the chicken, the gravy, whatever, all in the slow cooker, stuffing on the side. That I could handle. Everything's one, you know,
as long as there's stuffing, like
as long as there's stuffing.
Yeah.
And the stuffing needs to be, you know, on the side, right?
You can't
throw the stuffing in the slow cooker. But yeah, I would have, really, if I could have, I would have had the stuffing in there too. But that obviously would not have turned out very nice. So, but you know what? Suddenly it felt like something I could handle, right? It was few, right? All the ingredients were still there, but it was one dish. I wasn't trying to figure out how. Normally it's natural for me actually to figure out how to line up all my dishes to all be ready at the one time that you need for dinner, right? You know, it's not usually an issue. But through burnout, I had some real issues around cooking and getting my head wrapped around back into the kitchen. And you know what? Not one person complained. Not one person looked at us sideways like, what do you mean you made chicken stew? Like, it was like, here it is. Everybody loved it. It was delicious. It was great. All the fixings were there. You know, it was fine. It was fine. And
it was better for you, and it was more enjoyable for you.
Yeah.
You know?
And maybe that's something people need to understand. Like it's okay to go outside the box. You know, it's okay to say, I can't do this. I mean, I could have said, I'm overwhelmed with supper, I'm canceling Christmas dinner. I mean, that would have been pretty extreme to cancel a whole gathering because I couldn't figure out how to make supper. I could have asked somebody else to host it instead. I mean, there's other options.
Yeah.
But I didn't mind the thought of having people over isn't the part that was bothering me. It was, how do I get dinner on the table? That's where my holdup was, right? So you're kind of picking out, again, analyzing where's the core issue, right? And
what part is giving me the yucky feeling, you know?
Yeah.
And so you can do that. You can examine it a little more. It doesn't have to be cancel Christmas dinner, cancel Christmas, right? It's like, you know what? There's a part of this that I'm just dreading. So do I have permission to just not do that part and do it in a way, or do it in a way that works for me? Yes, probably yes, right? In almost all circumstances.
Yeah. And I should say, because my mom listens to this podcast, she did bring meat pie.
Well, that's great.
Thanks for bringing me pie.
Yeah.
You know, so there, you know, but I mean, I also could have made it potluck, right? Where then we would have just had to make one dish and left, you know, everybody
else an option
rounded
too.
Up. Like there are so many options out there.
And you still got to do the part that you wanted, which was to host and have people together at your house.
Yeah. And we had a great time. And because dinner was all in the slow cooker, I got to spend the time visiting with my family as opposed to being in the kitchen checking on dishes while everybody else. Because I find so often the people hosting don't get to visit, right? So we were talking about Christmas, but
well, and just talking about even the food thing is a great example, because I love to cook and historically have loved to cook every single thing. And if I'm asked to bring one thing, I'll bring 5, you know, but I've noticed lately with the little kids, I don't have as much time right now. And so it's like a little gift to myself if I just agree to bring one simple thing, you know, or to receive the support of not having to bring, you know, if someone says, don't bring anything, which just feels so wrong. But it's like, you know what? It actually, yes, thank you for that, because I'm actually not going to bring anything.
Yeah. Which is nice to have that choice.
I want to
have
show up and talk to you and enjoy and not feel the crushing pressure to make something when I mostly just want to get to the place and see someone that I care about, you know?
Yeah.
So I think family, like those types of meals are such a great example of how we put pressure on ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I
Mhm.
have told this story to a few people, and I have had people look at me with like their eyes getting all big, like their stew at Christmas time. Like
Just like,
I did. I
yeah,
did.
grab a bowl from the cupboard. It's in the slow cooker.
Like like it had all the same ingredients that everybody else had sitting on their table for
Yeah,
Christmas dinner, right?
yeah,
I just stuck it all
I
in one
love
pot.
that. Yeah.
And I have had the people who look at me rather appalled, you know, how dare you? But I mean, I've also been one to break the traditional Christmas dinner theme for my whole life. I mean, we served seafood and linguine one year. I mean, it's like, you know, like I'm less concerned
You're like,
about
I'm not attached.
I'm less concerned about the traditional thing than I am about getting together and having that family time and having that
Yeah,
visit. You know, I mean, I'm
yeah.
currently planning another get together. All the same people get together at Christmas. I'm planning a fall get together. And already, you know, I've known about it since spring. Well, I always host it in the fall, so I've known about it a long time, but you know, really started planning it in the spring. And I've changed my mind like 6 times what we're doing in the fall, because in the spring I was all excited about this idea, and then a few weeks
Mhm.
later, well, oh my gosh, I started researching it, and oh my gosh, that was a lot of work, and I don't know if I'm going to have the time and I'm going to have the energy. And like the way I feel right now, it's like it might be potluck.
Yeah.
Just get together,
Maybe a
potluck dinner.
potluck in the yard.
Forget
Yeah.
forget all the other grand plans that I had. It's going to be just the super simple thing, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
And maybe 2 weeks from now, I'll be like, nope, okay, let's plan something. And as it gets
Yeah.
closer and the deadline gets closer, I
And you
do kind of
know,
I nail
yeah.
myself down into something and get it done. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's really
Freeing
listening.
and
Yeah,
listening.
it is. And you're right though, it's freeing too to realize you have choice.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, you don't have to do anything. You know, I have to. So
Yeah.
forced me.
Yeah.
You know, oh
Yeah.
the expectation is, so I can't say no. No, you have a choice, and whoever that outside entity is will deal with it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And once you
Yeah.
make a decision, they will deal with it. Like, so you don't have to. If you don't have it in you, if you don't have the energy, if you are burnt out, stressed, depressed, anxiety, whatever, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Just
Yeah.
just say no, and you don't really have to explain yourself, you know?
Yeah.
I can't,
Just as
or
that outside entity is allowed to have opinions, and so are you. And so
yeah.
you're allowed to choose something that works better for you, and they can have, you know, their reaction. But I do want to get back to few significant, like, what
Yeah,
do we did here?
sorry.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, few significant thorough,
Zero.
just
Yeah.
because I love it. So when I think of few, like since I've learned this from you, for me, sometimes it's like, what areas of life can I work in right now? Right. So I have my work area, I have family, and then I have like a small area for um, social, or, you know, I have another little project that I work on, community project, but um, that's kind of it. So when I think about few, and then within there, then there's few things within each category, right? But it helps me be more aware about what I might take on, because do I actually have room for more? You know, and keeping it few makes it way easier to manage my life. And then the things about them being significant and being able to do them in a thorough way, right? Because so you and I are both like we've been in burnout. And I think when you're in that rushing, overly busy state, it's hard. You can't do anything thoroughly, right? You're just like, go over here, put a few minutes into that, few minutes into that. You're binging from thing to thing to thing, and none of it is thorough. And are you working in the areas of your life that are significant to you, right? Or will have significance over time? And that's just such a nice summary and reminder of choosing those things. You know, how much time are you putting towards something that's totally insignificant to your future
That's right. And even
or
if
the
it fits
future, what
into
you're trying to
few,
create? Yeah.
yeah. And even if it fits into few, the few that you've picked, is it significant?
Yeah.
Is it important? Is it a priority?
Yeah.
Right? Or is this something that is not a priority right now? Because then it doesn't belong on the few list.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you're saying that, like, let's talk about how we classify things that might not seem significant to other people. So, but are they important? You know, like you do art, you do upcycling, but that is on your few list. That's significant for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I realized that when I started minimizing, I um I'm very creative and I like doing a lot of crafting stuff, art stuff, painting, crochet, all kinds of, and I have a whole variety of interests. I never hone in on just one thing. So again, that's where that few significant thorough kicks in that realm as well. But when I started minimizing, I thought that there was no room for a crafting lifestyle in a minimalist home. Like how does that work? How does
Yeah,
that
right.
work? Because
Yeah.
and so I actually let all my crafting stuff go because that's no longer part of the lifestyle that I want. You know, crafting can really create a lot of clutter, right? And so it's just not what I wanted. And I thought I could just let that go. Other than crocheting, which I enjoyed doing, and it actually really helped me through when I went in through my burnout. It was something I could focus on. But really, for the most part, I mean, I painted once in a while, but you know, I really put a lot of that creative stuff away. And I downsized it, I minimized it, and I donated it. So it went out of the house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then through my burnout recovery, I realized at one point that my creativity actually started to come back. And I thought that, think now anyway, that part of letting it go was actually a process of entering into that burnout. Because you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm burnt out. I mean, you're probably going into burnout for years, right?
Yeah.
Before you hit that bottom. So I think part of losing that creative kind of energy that I had was going through these stressors and just not having room for it at that time. So it was a lot easier to let all that stuff go. But when I started to recover and I started to feel this creative energy coming back, and I started to want to kind of do things, but I wasn't sure what. And I was struggling with this minimalist lifestyle. But I got rid of all that stuff. And anyway, it kind of turned into this whole thing in my head. And it occurred to me that what I love is the creative process. I don't need to keep what I make.
Yes.
And I was like, hold on a second. That was like an epiphanal moment, right? Where I was like, you mean I don't need to keep it? So I'm not making stuff and then finding a shelf and finding a drawer and, you know,
Yeah.
gifting I can actually sell it, give it away, whatever I want to do with what I'm doing. So I spent about a year making stuff, just making whatever I wanted to make. I was actually very thoughtful about it though, because I was keeping kind of resale in mind. And being a minimalist and not wanting to create a lot of clutter, I kept in mind things like how can I make useful stuff? The environment is really important to me. So then I started looking towards, well, can I repurpose stuff? Can I recycle stuff? And what can I do? Pinterest kind of became my best friend for a very long time. I still do a lot of searches on Pinterest, but I started looking at all these different ideas and I was so inspired by what I was finding. And I really found some things that I really wanted to kind of hook into. And it was a lot of fun that we got a table at a craft sale last November, and like over 50%, probably 60 to 75% of our stuff sold. Like it was like, wow, like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a really positive experience for that. I had set the goal that it's okay to craft and I'm okay with letting it go,
Yeah.
and if I can
Yeah.
make some money on it, all the better, because I mean
Bonus.
it costs
Yeah.
money to make it, so sell it, that's great.
Yeah.
And we had this really great experience. So yeah, I have been really having a great time crafting
Mm-hmm.
again, and knowing that I'm going into these sales where I can, it's not in my house permanently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
think, sorry to interrupt, but
that's it.
the significance to you is something about the process. And I want to bring this up because I don't want anyone to think that when we say significant, we mean like mark on the world, achieve, forward yourself, progress. The significance might be inner and will be inner,
Yeah,
right? To the few things that you're operating on. It's an inner significance. It's something for you and your soul and your spirit. And that is why this crafting and upcycling is gets into your significant category.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm very, like I say, I'm very thoughtful about what I'm making. And
Mm-hmm. So it's
I
connected for you. It's very connected.
it's really
Yeah.
connected for me, and I'm excited about what I'm making, and I'm excited about what I'm learning, because of course I'm trying all kinds of new stuff, right? And and so yeah, I need a ton of variety. I've always needed
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that. I can never focus in on just one thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's always, I mean, I'm at the thrift store all the time, but I never am buying just random stuff of, well, I might do something with this one day. There's none of that. I already have projects in mind. I'm going there with a purpose.
Ah,
I'm looking for
yes.
certain things.
Yeah.
I don't have stacks and stacks of stuff, and my husband may disagree, but I don't have just stacks of stuff around waiting for me to figure out what to do with it.
Well,
I
and
have
that's
a
important,
plan.
right? Because do you think previous to minimalism, so many of us, I know with my own hobbies, sometimes I'm like, maybe shopping's my hobby because I will shop, like not so much now, but part of it is just like, oh, I might use this, I might use this. Like you're a crafter, so you might have spent hundreds of thousands, like not hundreds of thousands, but like hundreds upon hundreds of dollars just buying supplies to keep for in case.
Yeah,
And so, but the transition into minimalism, a minimalist philosophy is not to, you're using this now. It's like, I'm not going to buy that if I don't know what I'm doing with it.
exactly.
I'm not bringing that into my home to just store it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't,
Mm-hmm.
there's things that that I have that, I may not get to right away,
Mm-hmm.
but I already know what their purpose is. And as soon as I know what they're there for, I'm just waiting for that piece of me to say, I'm ready to work on that project. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to back up a bit with your significant and how I've applied this to significant throughout my day, I intentionally rearranged my workday to simplify my business day into, sometimes it's one or two, and I would say rarely three priorities for the day. And I pick a time in the afternoon where, you know, I work fairly well with deadlines, so I should be done by this time in the afternoon. And now I call it my playtime, which is really my crafting time. And now I get to go and do that, right? And I usually take a break in the middle where I go walk around outside, check out my garden, take some time in nature, kind of give myself that headspace transition time, out of work mode
Mm-hmm.
into creative
Mm-hmm.
mode. And then I go and work on whatever projects that are singing to me that day or waiting for me from yesterday or whatever.
Yeah.
And I usually have a few projects on the go on my desk there. A friend of mine who's a professional artist actually taught me you have to have at least 3 projects on the go because you're always waiting for something to dry. And that is very true, because I kind of get stuff. It's like, well, this is all drying. Now what?
Now I need to crochet.
Spill over onto the dining room table for a little bit,
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that I did very intentionally was I set up my office space and my art space separately. And I have a designated art space. It used to be that I would do all my creative stuff at the dining room table. And then, of course, if I had stuff drying, it would have to stay on the dining room table. And then we're trying to eat around it and, work around it. And also, I would have to make sure I had lots of time because I'm working on this project and I need to get it start to finish, in a certain amount of time. And all these things would get in the way. As soon as I gave myself a designated area, I have my own desk, I have my own closet for storage, I've got my own area for all my art stuff. Now I can leave something out on my desk to dry. I can have a bunch of projects on the go. I'm not in the way of the family, right? Yeah. I was able to prioritize giving myself the proper space to.
And then you can be doing your activity a lot faster as well.
Yeah. And it also happens, sorry, I'm just going to quickly say, it also happens that if I have 10 minutes, I'll sit down at my desk and I can actually do something. I can always move some project forward, even if I only have 10 minutes, which of course would never happen if I had to set everything up at the dining room table and I've got 10 minutes, it'll take me 10 minutes to set up, right? Yeah. And so I always have something on the go. I can always just take a few minutes and add. And I find that I'm always shocked at what you can get done in 10 minutes when it's readily available to you, right?
Yes. And that's the benefit of having few things, like few important things going on in your life, right? You probably can create, if they need a physical space, you can prioritize that or allot that because you don't have 10,000 things you need spaces for. It's like, well, this is my thing right now. Doesn't always have to, you might not craft in a couple of years or who knows, right? You can convert the space. Nothing is permanent, like you said in the beginning in your essay. And so you can really devote time, energy, space to the few things that are significant at any season of your life. Hopefully. That would be the kind of, part of the working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the thorough part of it is seeing it through, right? The few things that you have picked as a priority are significant. You focus just on those or just on that, if it's one thing, until it's finished, right? I'm the type of person where I have constant ideas. It's just, I can be watching TV, I have 10 ideas. Like I've got constant ideas. Most of them are crap, right?
So I've known Suzanne long enough now to know that she's not a minimalist by nature. Like you are, it actually suits you, but you have ideas like crazy. Like your mind can just come up with great ideas all the time.
It never stops.
And previously you would have chased down a lot more of them at once and tried to juggle and like hello burnout, right? So
yeah. And I've also started to understand that if I give them a little bit of time to gel, I learn a lot more about whether they're viable or not. Most ideas are not viable. Like most of them are like, okay, that was a great idea 3 days ago.
But and just because you have the idea, right? I'm guilty of this too. Just because I have the idea doesn't mean I'm suddenly married to it. Like I can get really passionate about something and think it's now the only way forward. And, using few, significant, thorough helps you kind of readjust back to the true sort of deeper priorities and assess whether you might have energy to bring that in. It doesn't have to happen instantly the minute you have the idea, the minute you married this idea.
That's right. Yeah. And it's okay to change your mind, mull it around, look at it from all sides, and decide that maybe that wasn't a good idea. It's okay to start and get into it and then decide that, okay, maybe this wasn't a good idea.
Oh, yeah. It's okay to do it for years and decide, change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay to change. And I've also been learning about, I'm the type of person where I've always kind of stood on my own 2 feet. I do my own thing. I do my, run things the way I want to run them and whatnot. And honestly, it's been the last 3 years that you and I met, and then we have actually collaborated a few times. We've done a few Instagram lives. We've tried, a few programs, and now with this podcast, and I'm really learning now the significance of 2 heads being better than 1. If only I've learned that how many years ago. But
Yeah.
but the it's not just it. Sorry, I've got like 5 words all coming into my head all at the same time here. But it's the collaboration, the enjoyment, the anticipation of welcoming someone else's ideas and figuring out how to do it together. It's I'm just really enjoying the whole process. And of course, this podcast is the biggest project that we have worked on together. And I think, we're both super excited about how it's coming together and what we're doing. And, our behind the scenes conversations are collaborative. I think we work really well together, and I am learning to kind of appreciate that opening my mind of letting other people in.
Yeah. Totally.
That is
Couldn't agree more.
something that's a little bit newer for me, but it's been a really great experience.
I think similarly, like receiving support from another person when you're an independent person, like you are, like I am, you forget the power of actually having someone to sort of support you, right? And so we're doing this project collaboratively, but I remember early in our relationship, I was stuck on something when we were in culinary nutrition, and it's tough for an independent person to reach out and say, like, I'm totally stuck. And you gave me the right advice to just like push through this thing I was stuck on. And that's also the power of, reaching out or trying to work collaboratively or, have a working relationship like this.
Yeah.
Like it's really helpful. And
It
also
is.
could be more fun, and it gets you out of your own head.
Yeah. I mean, they
Yeah.
say 2 heads are better than 1. We knew it takes so long to figure that out, right?
Yeah. But sometimes if you're headstrong, you're like, nah.
Well, and that's just it, and I'm, one of my super skills is problem solving. I love problem solving. It comes very natural to me. And so sometimes I tend to think that I don't necessarily need somebody else because I can figure it out for myself. I already know how to do it. I can do my own research. I can do my own this. I can do my own that. Don't worry. I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it figured out. Right. And sometimes it's okay to say, well, let me share with you what's happening. And you might just get that little nugget of information that's like, oh, there's the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just by opening yourself up a little bit to let somebody else kind of say
they're
their piece, right?
They might not be in your tunnel, right? So it's great to have someone from outside the tunnel say.
But I think it's also really important to be careful and considerate of who you're asking. I think you and I, share, but never, you have to be careful when giving advice, right? Because you don't want to come in, well, you should do this. You have to do this. Well, if it was me, this is what I would do, is not necessarily what is helpful, right? Oftentimes it's just listening, just being supportive, you can, kind of be careful about offering advice because that person doesn't have your history. They are not wearing your shoes, and they don't look at things from your point of view. So you have to be able to stand in that other person's shoes as
Yeah.
best you can and look at it from their situation, because what they do may not be what you would do at all. And what's best for them to do in that situation might be the complete opposite of what you would ever consider doing
Yeah.
in that situation. So being open to the other person and probably spending more time listening and less time
Hmm.
talking, and just let them sort it out. Most of the time, by the time they've talked it out, they solve their own problem anyway. And if you're really
Yeah.
good at listening, you're going to hear them solve their own problem. And if they missed it, that's when you point it out.
Yeah.
You just
And
said what you need to do.
there's nothing better than feeling a little bit understood, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like an opinion or a solution coming from outside, there's that feeling of like, no, this person actually gets why I'm feeling this way. It's like better than a solution sometimes.
Yeah.
Solutions coming, times are changing, things will change. Nothing is permanent, as
Yeah.
you said, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But
And the solution's
to
always
have
there.
someone say, okay, so I guess getting back to the topic at hand, which
Yeah.
we've really diverted from, when you're feeling low, like you were feeling, the roller coaster. Oh, there's so much I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But, to have someone just say, like, I get that you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now. I get that you're a little burnt out. Sounds like a lot, or I see that it's a lot. You've got this going on and this going on. That feels so important.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's,
thank you.
it
I'm not
is.
losing it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's comforting
Mm-hmm.
to realize you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you read something in a book, or a friend shares something with you that's really personal, and on some level you're like, oh, I'm you mean somebody else feels that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a huge comfort, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was a risk for them to probably say it, because if you're feeling that, it was probably something that they don't normally share,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're kind of on the other side going, you mean I'm not the only one? I mean, I think it's hilarious how often you see a meme, right? When you're scrolling on your phone, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it'll say something, some thing when you're
Yeah.
brushing your
Yeah.
hair, or putting
No
your makeup
one
on.
like the
And it's
one I
like,
think
does
about.
everybody do? And it's like, you mean everybody does that?
Yes. Like what
I
I think
thought it
about
was
all the
weird.
time is nobody tells you that when you become a parent, how many times you will stand up as soon as you sat down.
Okay.
I think about that every day. I just feel so seen. You sit down, someone says, can I have something? You get back up. You
Yeah.
finally sit down with your coffee. Like, oh, you have to go to the bathroom. It's like, oh, I feel so understood. It
Yeah, but
helps. It
there's
helps.
a comfort in knowing that what you thought was your problem is the world's problem.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
so many people are, they made a meme about it.
Like
It's got to be a thing.
universal. It's
It's got to be a
universal.
thing. It's not personal at all,
Yeah.
but we're comforted when we're talking to our friends and somebody says something and it's like, oh, that I connect
Yeah.
with that. And I thought that maybe I was alone
Yeah.
in that feeling.
Yeah.
So, um, pick your friends carefully, and
Yeah.
but
End of podcast.
yeah, yeah.
No, I do want to, sorry, you're
No, go
finishing your
ahead.
thought.
No, go
I
ahead.
do want to actually get back to the can a high trigger a low essay
Yes.
that you sent out. And again, like this essay is exactly what we're saying. When you kind of swallow your whatever and decide to send out something, we can all relate, even though you feel like it's just you. So can a high trigger a low? I thought this was such a good essay, and it really reflects my experience with my own endeavors and my own passionate endeavors. Things I get really excited about when I launch, a new part of my business, or I'm really excited about a project at home. And or this podcast was an example we've been throwing around. I get so excited and I start feeding a lot of my time and energy into the thing for a week or two, right? And it's been really helpful for me to notice that this pattern will almost inevitably lead to a low period after, because I have just thrown myself into something for a while. And I've had to learn that there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of a little bit of a emotional, energetic roller coaster that I'm fine with, now that I know that part of it is that my energy will kind of, I always call it kind of like an energetic hangover, right? I'll spend
Yes.
3 days like flying on an idea, and then wake up one morning and just feel like, oh, I'm so tired, so
Yes.
tired. I have nothing more to give this idea. And that can feel really bad at first. You think, oh, well, I suck. Like, I suddenly can't do this, and
Yeah.
I'll never do it again. It's dead. It's over. Right. But, having gone through this cycle a few times, it can be with anything, right? Quilting, I can pour out, spend an entire weekend, and then it might take me like 4 months to finish the quilt. But I think building the awareness is just really helpful, because and accepting the feelings on all parts of that cycle makes you feel more at home with yourself, right? So we enter maybe a low after a period of flying high on an idea, or you had a great party. There's lots of elements of your life this could be working on. And then low is just an energetic state too,
Yeah.
and it's nice to say, or to have a friend who says like, yeah, go back to bed, or cancel your plans this weekend. It sounds like you need a recharge. And I'm saying that like I'm saying it to a friend, but what if I say that to myself?
Right.
What if I notice the energy and I opt to do a little recharge time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I kind of ebb and flow the same way where, I get these energy highs and then I kind of crash and get energy high. And you would think by now I would recognize the pattern, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when you're in it, it always seems to take, for me anyway, it takes some time, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going along excited, this thing's great, and you're having a good time. And then you wake up one morning and it's like, I feel like crap and I have no energy and I just want to stay in bed and cuddle my dog and, everybody go
Mm-hmm.
away. But it can actually take a few days for me to go, hold on a second, right? Like just this exact thing that I just wrote about, right? It takes a
Mm-hmm.
few days to recognize the pattern
Yeah,
because when you crash, it feels terrible.
it
And
does.
it's like
Yeah.
you forget that
Totally.
this is just part of what happens, but you feel so awful that
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to think that this is just a pattern. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
how
And so the
depressing.
practice, like the really hard practice, is to notice as soon as possible, or to consider
Yes.
the possibility that it's okay that you feel like this.
Yeah.
Maybe not the first morning, maybe it's the second morning. Start catching it a little quicker, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, or what if you don't even know why, but you're just like, what, this morning I feel off. I'm gonna have today allow that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
you're absolutely correct where the sooner that you can have the thought cross your mind that this is your pattern,
Yeah.
this is kind of, recognize that maybe you've had a lot of energy in the last, little
Mm-hmm.
while, and that maybe this is just your body saying, I need a rest, or your mind saying, take a break,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Be
And
gentle with yourself.
if you have a body that has hormonal cycles monthly,
Yeah,
that also can play a big role in energy flow throughout the, month-ish, or whatever it is for
definitely.
your body. Yeah.
Definitely.
And so often we want to push against that, you know,
Yeah.
and until we get to a point of allowance or acceptance, we want to push against it and just try to show up for whatever it was we were showing up in a big way for 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But
we can
that,
have a lot of judgment and negative self-talk around our inability to, feel good.
right, to show up. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that we very easily fall into that where now you're in a down, but you have to push yourself because you don't want everybody around you to start like, oh, oh, you seem off today. Oh, you
Yeah.
don't want to walk in there all glum. And it's like, no, everybody saw me on this high and everyone's so excited. And I got to keep up that
Yeah.
energy. And so we start kind of faking it. Right.
Yeah.
And then, but that's just draining our energy. And I'm not saying go in there all glum and you don't want to rain on other people's parade,
Mm-hmm.
but it is okay to maybe go in and just be a little quieter
Yes.
or make some accommodations that you're still applying yourself, but maybe it's that few significant thorough. What's the one priority I have to do today?
Yeah.
And just focus on that without
Mm-hmm.
worrying about juggling the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Focus on being in the moment. Like we haven't really talked about that, right? We're so busy forward thinking and
Mm-hmm.
what do we have to do next?
And
That,
negative self-talk, if we don't, then I won't have this future thing that's,
yeah,
is coming or isn't coming. Come
right.
back to this
Stay,
moment. Not everything has to depend on,
right. If I'm
yeah.
focused on this one thing, this one few thing that I have picked, and just stay in that moment, right? Just stay with the one thing
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible so that you're not depleting your energy by having your mind wander around. And I mean that takes practice, to kind of settle the mind, but just keep bringing yourself back to focusing this one thing until I'm done.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what's next,
Yeah.
because when this thing's done, whatever's next is still going to be waiting for you. It's still going to present itself. It's still going to,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
concerning yourself with it now is really just waste of time.
Yeah.
Focus on the
Mm-hmm.
one thing, just stay in the present moment. And like I said, that's something that we don't do. That is a practice that takes time. Like when I kind of transition out of my office and before I go and sit in my art space, I said I'd like to go and walk around the yard or walk through my garden or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I am just in the moment in there. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to work on when I get to my desk because I
Mm-hmm.
already know. I already know, so I don't have to think about it really. And
So
if I don't know,
you're just kind of like allowing yourself to shake off what you're working on before
yeah, it's giving
and
my brain a
create
chance
space.
to because now I'm going to go be creative, which
Mm-hmm.
is different. I'm still creative during my workday, right? Because writing is a creative endeavor, but it's a different kind of creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going into a visual creative, and so I just find having that little bit of transition time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not worried about what I was just working on in my office. I'm not worried about what project is sitting on my art desk. Now I'm in my garden,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling a few weeds and I'm checking to see what's growing or not growing
Mm-hmm.
in this case this year. It's
Yeah.
my garden has become a little bit of a thing, but I keep going out there with some hope and
Yeah.
to see what's new and changing and
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm ready to come in and
And
focus.
I want to stay on this for a sec, because staying present is probably one of the hardest things that we face. And when when you go to your garden, or when I similarly might be doing something like that, a transition time, or in my garden, or I'm cooking, you and I also can have our minds wander and be very busy. So you are there practicing present mindedness, meaning that you're intentionally taking that time. I want people to know that it's not just like, oh, it's easy and natural.
Oh no.
It's like, well, I need to maybe work on this being a present intentional time. So I'm going to look at, what if I look at the flowers and see what colors they are? Or the shape of some of the plants and the leaves. Or I'll look, like, you bring the focus of your mind to the present moment.
Yeah.
And that is something we can all do.
Yes.
And practice. And then you might start thinking about work again, or the conversation you have to have. But you can go back to knowing that you have that 10 minutes in your garden, for example, or the walk from work to your car, and notice, are any of the flowers fragrant? Have the plants grown? Let me check the water gauge. I find it helps if I actually say those things to myself. That helps
Yes.
distract me from
Yes,
the other
definitely.
tape that's running, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is part of the practice. Like,
Yeah.
like we just said a few minutes ago that you and I both come up with like 1,000 ideas,
Yeah.
but like obviously our brain is not always in the moment. We're always thinking of other things. I'm watching
Yeah.
TV and I'm thinking 20 other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a practice to
Mm-hmm.
say, in this moment, I want to be just in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a conscious decision. It's an intentional decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not all the time. It's not impossible, but I mean, Buddhist monks apparently can do it all the time. We're not that,
Yeah.
right?
No.
That
I was
takes
not a
lot.
Buddhist monk this morning in my garden. I
Like
want
that.
everyone to know, for the record, that this morning in my garden, which was out of control with weeds, I got out there. I had our two little kids, and they were just like, "Mom, mom, 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 we want this, we want this, and I was like overwhelmed, rage weeding. Like I was just like, if I don't clear these weeds, I'm going to go nuts. And my mental tape was like, it took me all morning to clear, like
Yeah.
these things happen, right?
Yeah.
And I was just so overwhelmed with thoughts and my experiences of the moment.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
then being on
hard
demand too, right?
being on
There's
demand.
little voices are
Mhm.
constantly talking and they're breaking that train of thought, right?
Yeah. And so here I was like looking forward to clearing out the garden and being there, and it just turned into like a real episode. But similarly to the topic, like, can a low trigger a high? The awareness is everything. The awareness of knowing I'm going to need to recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I also need to give myself permission to recover from that overwhelm, right?
Yeah.
So it would seem crazy to say I need to recover from gardening, but with my children. But I did. Everything about my energy was like, I cannot start work yet. I need to like be with myself and let everything come back down because
Yeah.
I'm at like a 10. And when I was thinking about doing this episode, I was thinking, what's helpful for when our energy cycles, right? And part of it is getting to know your cycle and anticipating that you might need recovery periods or transition periods like you're talking about, and building in to your life the time to recover from high energy times. Again, like we really probably need to have an extrovert on this show. It's just like all introverts all the time.
Yeah.
But like now I know I'm probably going to crash. I'm going to have a really big week. It's got lots of great things. And then I'm going to need a weekend or probably a weekday where I have nothing because I need recovery time. So part of it is anticipating for myself, my energetic needs, and trying to get to know myself better for my own, cycles.
Yeah.
And so I think like awareness. So even just talking about this, you and I, anticipating and then accepting the reality that there will be a low energy time period.
Yeah.
And embracing that and what that means for you.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of hitting a nail on the head there, where that's not something that we normally do. It's not something that I do, because of course when I go into this high of excitement and adrenaline and this is so fun and we're having a great time, there's all this work and we're so focused and it's great, you're not thinking in that moment, this isn't going to last, because you're having fun. You feel elated. You're in a good space. The last thing you want, if somebody said this isn't going to last, you'd be like, well, you're negative, right? Don't be negative. And so I don't think, I think you have to be careful that it's not, this isn't going to last, but there does need to be this little reminder that maybe if you don't build in the downtime, you're going to crash.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like maybe
Yeah.
and maybe that's a lesson that I need to take away from, you know, that we were so busy for those 2 weeks and everything was great. Had I, as much as I'm intentional already and building in, these are my few significant thorough, and I'm building in my art time and whatever else, but maybe I needed to build in something, maybe that's something I need to explore, right? When I get really busy on a new project and things are going, maybe I need to, is there something else that I really need to do for my self-care so that I don't wake up in the morning in a full crash,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or that's a pretty regular pattern for me. So maybe that's the way it is, and I need to anticipate that. And then when that happens, recognize that for what it is, and then put in the self-care kind of times 10.
Either way
so that I
work.
can recover quicker.
Yes.
Right? Which
Yes.
is honestly probably a more realistic thing for me, because, you know,
it's hard to
when
pump
you're
the brakes when you're
when you're having
flying
fun and you're up there
Yeah.
and everything feels good, the last thing you're thinking is I should take a break so that I don't crash.
Yeah.
Because you're in that moment, you're not thinking that you're going to crash, and you can't really anticipate when that's going to happen. Right?
And it is a little fun sometimes to ride that flow.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, you know, because that's the juice of life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, either way, if you decide, you know what, this has been going great for 3 days, but now I really need to take a day of different time so that I can come back on Monday and be, or whatever day it is, and be really excited again.
Yeah.
I'm going to recharge, or ride the flow and have a great time, and know that when the lower part comes, yeah, like you said, better about deeper self-care, recover faster, and then carry on with the project. You know, I hate to think that you feel low, and some people might give, I know I've probably felt this, right? Like it's over. But it's not. We just need to keep going. Plod away at those things that make you feel like that.
Yeah.
That make
but
you feel
just
great.
Serve your energy, right? Like keep going. You know, it's not like, you know, we crashed and said, well, I guess that podcast sucked up all my energy. So much for that idea. Right? I mean, no, it was fortunately right now it only comes out every other week. So we do have some time to kind of talk. And Elizabeth and I did in between the last episode and recording this episode. We actually had a day that we were supposed to record and ended up just chatting the whole time away because we were both in this place of kind of overwhelm and sharing, and which is why we kind of thought we would talk about it on this one, because we ended up not recording. And we made a conscious decision, though. At one point we said, so are we recording today? It's like, I'm not in the headspace. I'm not in the headspace either. Okay,
well, let's just talk.
Then obviously today we just need to talk. And then
I was so excited about today. So that break we took, like, was perfect. And then today I was like, okay, I love this podcast and get us back. Like, I just couldn't wait.
Exactly. You know, and but there was a conscious decision that, you know what, we thought this is what we were going to do. We're changing the plan. We're both okay with that. And even if one of us wasn't, I mean, if you're not in the mood to record, you're not in the mood to record. Like, you know, and maybe today, that day was just about kind of holding our friendship and supporting each other. And that's what that was. And ended up being what we needed in that moment. Right. Yeah. So it's about, you know, being able to accept again for yourself. I think if we had tried to record that day, we both, probably wouldn't have been very good. We would have been a little disjointed. We were both in a little bit more of a down state. And, you know, I'm not thinking it would have been the best quality conversation.
No,
right?
yeah. And so I think we made a really good call. And I think even in how we've set up the recording to be every 2 weeks
Mhm.
in general, also allows for a little bit of ebb and flow of our ability to work
That's right.
well. And I'm sure maybe we had the conversation early in the planning, but I think both you and I would have been like, let's do it every week. Like that's old patterns, right? We're gonna go big.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like kind of fail at it because it's like
Yeah,
too much.
too much,
Guys, too much.
too much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have often said, go big or go home, you know,
Yeah.
and
Okay, that's the
uh,
next week we're gonna talk about go big or go home.
go big or go home. And that is something I've really had to learn, and
Examine.
the hard
Yeah.
way, that does not work for me. I've tried it over and over and banged my head against that brick wall over and over because, and going big is kind of translated to also perfectionism.
Oh my gosh. Right now I'm thinking about all the problems with that phrase.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
actually not helpful.
No,
I'd say go small and take little steps
yes,
and keep going. Just keep
yes,
going.
yes. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a meme that I saw a long time ago, and I shared it on Instagram. It's quite a while ago, but it's quite popular. It's still circulating, but it shows two ladders. It's kind of an illustrated thing. It shows two ladders, and one where the rungs are really far apart, and the
Mm-hmm.
person is standing at the bottom, kind of looking up at these rungs, but they're still at the bottom,
Yeah.
right? Because they can't reach the first rung. And
Yeah.
then the second ladder has the rungs much closer together, and that person is 3/4 of the way up the ladder. And it's just the difference between taking those constant baby steps, those consistent baby steps,
Yeah.
versus trying to take a big leap and a big leap and a big leap. You
Mm-hmm.
don't get nearly as far,
Yeah.
right? That when I saw that meme, it spoke to me so much. And I was like, this is where I'm at right now, because I used to be that big rung person, and I would
Mm-hmm.
fall flat because you're constantly jumping for that first rung, but you've taken
Mm-hmm.
on too much.
And go home is really such a shame-filled statement, right? So it's like if
Well,
you can't successfully take that huge leap successfully, you don't, you have no worth.
that's right.
And there have been so many, projects or things with business that I've built or my husband and I have built where I had to learn that you need to build on what came before, step by step by step by step. There is no, okay, I'm sure there's like the odd example, but when you're building a business, for example, you can't just conceptualize something gigantic and then execute it and then it will all go 100% perfectly. Like that doesn't
No.
work.
Yeah.
Going big almost doesn't work because you don't even have the awareness or the experience to know what that thing would be. So when you take the baby steps and you just add on the next thing you're ready for, you can keep going and you start to build something that's way more sustainable.
Yeah.
And the same thing applies to when you take on a new a new health routine, or you take on meal prep, or you have to maybe you're changing your diet or a new sleep routine. We often create these big plans and goals and we quote unquote fail at them,
Yeah.
and we think, well, I must not belong in that. It's not for me. And baby steps of changing your routines really is a way more sustainable practice.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yes. And that has been, another one of my huge, lessons
Yeah.
coming through, just life experience. I'm not sure that's even a burnout recovery thing. I mean, it is and it isn't, but just that life experience, if you keep figuring out, it's like, okay, well, let's try it this way then, and
Right.
let's try
Yeah.
it with the smaller steps, and let's just put out there where I'm at right now, and let's see what happens. And then
Mm-hmm.
slowly building. I mean, and I guess through burnout, I mean, I've morphed even what I'm doing with my blog, and my business idea. I mean, I've morphed it 3 or 4 times over the years because I didn't have the energy. at first, going through burnout. I thought I wanted to do this and I took on too much. I burnt out and I crashed, right? So then I end up with a long pause in what I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah.
And then I try again. Okay, I honed it and I molded it and let's try this now. And then the same thing, you kind of get going, and then after a little while it's like, oh, and you kind of burn out and crash. It's not quite working out. It took time to figure out where my heart was, where I really wanted to be, where I really wanted to focus with what I was doing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, figuring it out for myself, because I'm talking about things that I am personally applying to my own life. So that was a learning process too. And it still is. It's a constant learning process. I'll be sharing 3 years from now, even next year will probably be slightly skewed from what I'm sharing this year, because I'm going to just keep learning, right? And applying and figuring it out and learning about myself and, kind of what works out there.
Yeah. Another great reason I'm glad we're doing this podcast, just as a coupling to the, the twists and turns that our lives will take as we are trying to apply these principles, So I think on that note, and where we'll be in a year is kind of exciting. I think we'll wrap up for today so that we have energy for next recording.
That's right. For next time. Energy to go make dinner later. So as always, we will link in the notes to Elizabeth's website, my website, for more information. Sign up for, you just go to if you want to sign up for my newsletter, you just go to my website. The sign up pops right up there for you. Email us. I'm going to have our email address in the notes as well. It's destinationsimple.podcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, your thoughts on this episode or past episodes. We will, if you have a question about simple living, intentional living, we would love to hear from you.
Or something you'd like us to talk about in a future episode.
Absolutely. Share with us what your thoughts are, and we're more than happy to address it on our podcast. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Everybody.
See you soon, Suzanne.
Have a great day.
Bye.